Have you ever felt like a mirror, always reflecting the joy of others while deep inside, you are left with nothing but a blurry, hollow space? Have you ever wondered why, the more you try to please the world, the smaller and more invisible you feel within the shadows of your own life? Today, we listen to the story of a mirror maker, a journey of deep sacrifice, forgotten dreams, and the heavy price paid to finally find oneself again. In a secluded workshop by the sea, there lived a man who was famous for his craft, creating mirrors that seemed to hold a soul of their own. He watched the tides come and go, much like the many people who visited his shop, seeking to see a better version of themselves in his work. Each glass he polished was a gateway to another person's happiness, yet his own reflection remained a mystery, hidden behind the daily grind of his labor. He believed that by serving others, he would eventually find his own light, but the silence of the workshop only grew deeper with every passing year. The echoes of the ocean seemed to whisper his name, calling him back to a self he had long ago traded for the approval of the world. He was a master of reflection, a weaver of light, but in the process of making everyone else shine, he had become a ghost in his own home. His tools were extensions of his hands, carving out beauty for others while his own heart remained unshaped and rough, like an unpolished stone on the shore. He was the silent observer of 1,000 lives, a man who gave everything away until there was nothing left but the sound of the waves outside. In his warm workshop, he spent hours minding the dreams of others. Every stroke of the grinder was a silent promise to make them look perfect. When they looked into his mirrors, they didn't see glass. They saw their own confidence, their hidden beauty, and the dreams they were too afraid to chase. He lived for their smiles, for that brief moment when their eyes lit up. He thought their happiness was his own, a noble sacrifice for the sake of art. Day after day, from the first light of dawn until the stars claimed the sky, he labored to erase every flaw from the reflections he created for them. He ignored his own hunger and his own fatigue. To him, a single scratch on a mirror was a failure to serve the world's need for perfection. He believed his value was measured by the satisfaction of his clients. He was the invisible pillar supporting the vanity and the pride of the entire town. But as his mirrors grew more radiant, he began to fade. The color drained from his life as he poured all his vibrancy into the glass he sold. He gave them visions of paradise while living in a desert of his own making. He was the architect of their joy and the prisoner of his own duty. His identity was slowly being replaced by the function he performed. He was no longer a man. He was simply the one who makes the mirrors shine. That story gets better every time. People spoke of his talent, but they never spoke to him.
We should head down to the festival before it gets dark.
A tool they used to feel better before returning to their busy lives. A mirror cannot see itself without a soul of its own. By polishing everyone else's image, he had forgotten how to recognize his own face in the glass. He was trapped in a cycle of endless improvement for others, a slave to the perfection he thought was his calling, but was actually his slow disappearance. The world outside was full of genuine beauty, yet he chose to spend his days creating artificial reflections of it, losing his connection to reality in the process. He carried the weight of 1,000 expectations on his shoulders, never realizing that the burden was crushing the very person he was meant to be. He decorated the lives of the rich and the powerful with his art, while his own life remained barren, stripped of any personal joy or self-care. He had become a part of the workshop itself, as static and unchanging as the glass he worked on, a silent witness to his own slow erasure. The more he sought validation through his service, the more he felt like a shadow, a whisper in a room full of loud, demanding voices. The mirror was his masterpiece, but it was also his tomb. He had poured his entire essence into a surface that only knew how to take. He was losing his grip on his own existence, becoming as thin and fragile as the very material he spent his life trying to master for others. Then came the storm, both outside and within. The sky turned black. and the ocean roared with a fury that mirrored the artisan's forgotten, hidden pain. He stood before his greatest work, a mirror designed to reflect the entire world. But as he looked into it, he felt a sudden, terrifying emptiness. The glass showed the walls, the tools, and the storm, but it refused to show him. He was a hole in the fabric of his own reality. Sacrifice without limits is a sweet poison. It tricks us into believing we are living for a higher purpose, while we are actually erasing ourselves completely. When you choose to be the good person by discarding your own needs, you are teaching the world that you simply do not matter at all. He realized that the mirrors weren't just reflecting others, they were absorbing him, taking his time, his health, and his very soul into their cold depths. To be invisible in your own life is the ultimate tragedy. He had built a temple of service, only to find himself buried alive beneath its foundations. He cried out, but the sound was drowned by the thunder. No one was there to hear him, for he had never allowed anyone to truly see him. Every yes he had given to a demanding stranger was a no. He had whispered to his own heart, until that heart eventually fell silent. He had become the ultimate servant, so efficient and so quiet that his presence was no longer required for the world to keep moving forward. Even the most honest mirror will eventually refuse to recognize a person who has spent their whole life trying to be someone else for others. The cracks were beginning to show. The structure of his self-denial was failing under the pressure of the truth he could no longer hide from. He was fading away, becoming a literal ghost of the man he used to be, a victim of his own misplaced kindness and lack of boundaries. He was being suffocated by the very things he had created to bring light to others. His art had become his own personal reflective prison cell. He was a stranger to himself, an outsider looking into a life he had built, but never actually lived, a passenger in his own weary body. Nature roared its disapproval of his self-neglect. The storm was a wake-up call, a violent reminder that even a mirror needs a solid back to exist. His heart finally broke along with the glass. The illusion of his noble sacrifice was shattered, revealing the hollow, painful reality of his choice. He was alone with his failures, realizing that by being everything to everyone, he had become absolutely nothing to the only person who mattered, himself. This was the cost of his silence. This was the result of a life lived for the sake of others' perceptions and a complete disregard for self. When the storm finally calmed, the silence was different. It wasn't empty anymore. It was a space filled with the potential for a new beginning. He didn't try to polish the shard. He didn't try to make it perfect. For the first time, he just looked at what was actually there. In that broken piece of glass, he saw a scar on his hand. It was real. It was a part of him that wasn't for anyone else. To find yourself, you must be brave enough to smash the perfect images you built to please others. You must destroy the lie to see the truth. Each strike was a liberation. He was breaking the chains of expectation, the heavy iron bars of what he should be for the sake of the world. These fragments were not a sign of failure. They were the raw, honest pieces of a life that had been hidden for far too long. As the perfect reflections died, he began to live. The light that he had given away was slowly finding its way back to its original source. Don't be afraid of your own cracks. That is where the light gets in. The brokenness is where your true strength and identity finally begin to grow. He chose to be a real, jagged piece of truth rather than a perfect, empty lie. He was choosing himself over the shadows of his customers' vanity. His shadow returned to him, grounded and real. He was no longer a ghost. He was a man walking on his own path, on his own terms. The air felt different now. It didn't taste like dust and work. It tasted like salt, life, and the infinite possibilities of a new day ahead. He saw his age, his fatigue, and his hope. It wasn't pretty, but it was his. And for the first time, he found it absolutely beautiful. He began to collect the pieces of his life. Not to fix them, but to use them to create something entirely new and entirely his own. He was no longer a tool for others. He was his own master, guided by his own internal light and his own hard-won sense of self-worth. He had survived his own disappearance. He had fought the void and won, coming back with a soul that was battered but finally, undeniably his own. Finding your identity isn't about being selfish. It's about setting sacred boundaries that protect the precious light you carry within your own unique and beautiful heart. It's about learning to say no to the world's endless, draining demands so that you can finally say a powerful, life-changing yes to your soul. The mirror maker no longer polished glass for vanity. He used the fragments of his past to build a vision of his own authentic, deeply personal truth. His mirrors now didn't just show beauty, they showed the reality of being human. They showed the scars, the light, and the deep complexity of life. He stepped out into the world, not as a servant, but as a participant. He was no longer watching life from the sidelines of a workshop window. For the first time in years, he felt the earth beneath him. He felt the connection between his body and the world he had once only reflected. His shadow was clear and strong. It was a testament to his presence, a proof that he occupied space and that his existence had a true weight. He was free from the cage of others' opinions. He was like the birds, moving by his own will, following his own internal compass toward the horizon. He learned that a sacrifice is only valuable if it doesn't kill the one who makes it. True kindness starts with being kind to your own spirit. His home was now a place of creation, not a place of hiding. He had reclaimed his sanctuary from the ghosts of his own misplaced sense of duty. He found peace in his own company. He no longer needed the constant validation of a customer's smile to feel like he was worthy of existing. His hands had built many things for others, but their greatest work was the reconstruction of the man they belonged to, the man who was now whole. The sea didn't care if he was perfect. The wind didn't care if he was helpful. They accepted him as he was, a part of the grand design. He had found the rhythm of his own heart. It was a steady, quiet beat that told him he was enough, exactly as he was, right now. The journey was long, but he had finally arrived. He was the mirror maker who had learned to see himself, and in doing so, saw everything. Do not let your kindness become a cage that traps your soul. You are not a tool meant to decorate the lives of everyone else you meet. You are a unique being with your own flaws, your own desires, and a value that cannot be replaced by any amount of service or sacrifice. Stop looking at yourself through the eyes of others. Their perceptions are just distorted reflections of their own needs, not the truth of who you are.
Who
the greatest sacrifice you can make
when
is
no
not
one
losing
is
yourself
watching,
for the world, but holding on to your soul in a world that tries to change you. Start healing the mirror of your own soul today. Look into it with honesty, with compassion, and with the courage to see the real person inside. You deserve to be seen, not just for what you can do for others, but for the beautiful, complex, and wonderful human being that you already are. Your life is your own masterpiece. Don't let others hold the brush. Take back the power to define your own worth and your own destiny today. The echoes of your soul are waiting to be heard. Listen to them. They will guide you back to the truth that you have always carried inside. Remember the mirror maker. Remember that even the smallest shard of truth is more powerful than 1,000 perfect reflections of a life you don't own. Be real, be you, and never apologize for the light that shines from your own unbroken, original, and deeply beautiful spirit. You are finally home. Look into your heart.